I am so pleased to welcome Patrick Wyman here to be our presenter during this webinar. He is a supervisory special agent for the FBI, so he's extremely knowledgeable in scams and frauds and things that you should be looking out for during not only in this time period, but throughout the year. So without further ado, because I know we started a little late, I would like to introduce Patrick Wyman, and he will be giving you some key insights for this webinar. I look forward to talking to you towards the end. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, Marilyn. I definitely appreciate that, and hopefully everyone can hear me at the moment. As Marilyn said, my name is Patrick Wyman. I'm a supervisory special agent with the Washington Field Office of the FBI. And in this role, I supervise a squad which focuses on corporate fraud, frauds and swindles, and intellectual property rights violations. And what Marilyn has asked us to speak on today is general fraud awareness and specifics related to elder fraud scams. So what I'm going to do is generally walk you through a few things today, touch base a little bit on the general overview of the FBI, just to give you a little bit of background. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the complex financial crimes threats, and then some recent fraud trends. Now, these are not going to be all-encompassing today. Unfortunately, the number of frauds that the FBI investigates are quite substantial. They're voluminous. We've got many different fraud schemes, and they're ever changing and developing. So we're trying to keep up with the illicit actors that are trying to scam our elders out there. And so we're going to try to give you some information on what these things look like. I'm going to walk you through avoiding and then responding to or reporting scams. And then, as Marilyn said, we'll do a little bit of a question and answer session here at the end. So to walk you through generally the FBI and what we do, the general programs and priorities for the FBI, as it relates to our enforcement actions within the United States, focus primarily on domestic and international terrorism, counterintelligence matters, cybercrime, and public corruption, and that's public corruption both at a federal and local level. We focus in on civil rights violations. Of course, there's organized crimes and drugs, and then complex financial crimes, which is where my squad would be coming in. And that's everything that you can imagine related to complex financial matters, to include securities fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, frauds and swindle activity. You name it, we're going to cover the gamut of different types of financial crimes. And then violent crimes and major offenders. And then within each of these, there's of course subcategories of what we do. For us, and what we do, of course, law enforcement and community, these partnerships are what relate to success for us. Obviously, we can't do our job without having the ability to work with victims, but also private sector, and much of our investigative effort and success is based on those relationships and partnerships that we have, such as what we're doing here today with Marilyn and her crew. So as a footprint information for you in terms of what the FBI looks like, our headquarters is located in Washington, D.C., and we have 56 field offices throughout the United States. But then we also have resident agencies, which are just smaller versions of those field offices or that are attached to those field offices. And then our international footprint contains or consists of 80 different legal attaché offices. We're typically co-located with embassy staff, and we have a few law enforcement personnel to help liaison with our international partners, our international law enforcement partners, in order to try to get work done in these different countries where we do not have law enforcement authority, but we can work with those law enforcement partners in order to be able to assist us with our investigative efforts here back stateside. So let's just talk a little bit about what complex financial crimes looks like. As I mentioned, you have corporate and securities fraud and commodities fraud. And corporate fraud, the way to think about that is going to be any crime in which a corporation is either an entity or a subject. And then securities and commodities fraud, securities, basically high yield investment schemes, Ponzi schemes, insider trading. And then frauds and swindles, which is what we're going to focus on today, deals with any type of fraudulent activity, which could include investment scams, and a lot of elder fraud exploitation type scams, such as what we're going to cover today: romance scams, telework scams, work at home scams, these sorts of things, which we're going to walk through and discuss today. Healthcare fraud and our financial institution or mortgage fraud matters, would be covered necessarily under a different presentation, but it's important to note for our elder fraud focus of today's presentation that those can also impact our elder groups. For example, there's reverse mortgage fraud, where reverse mortgages are taken out either in the names of borrowers, or that could impact borrowers through predatory, type of loans. And then there's also pandemic relief loans, which have impacted our elder population, to include unemployment insurance loans being taken, or unemployment insurance benefits being taken out in elders' names, or paycheck protection loan frauds, again, in elder names. And some of our elders are not even working here anymore, yet loans are being taken out in their names. So there's a lot of things that could impact potential victims. The types of frauds that we see, and you can just kind of see in the last few years, we don't have 2021 obviously yet, but the types of frauds and schemes that we see, and then the dollar amount of victimization that happens. At the very top of that list really is romance scams. And through IC3 reporting and FBI.gov, our crime statistics reporting indicates that romance scams or lottery scams result in significant losses to victim entities and individuals. When you're talking about individuals believing that they're falling in love with someone online and sending money out of their bank accounts to the benefit of someone they've never met, which is what happens in a romance scam, those numbers are really staggering. And unfortunately, these are not really things that we can, within law enforcement, enforce or prosecute our way out of. What we need to do is try to educate the public, which is what these sorts of presentations that we're doing today hope to do, give you some tips on what to look for and how to avoid being victimized by these scams. So let's start talking about a few of these. The first one that I want to walk through and mention for you is what we call email account compromise or business email compromise. And what this is essentially a scam targeting either businesses or individuals, in which email account detail is changed or modified so that the individual receiving an email believes that they're actually corresponding with a true person. A great example of that might be in a real estate transaction in which a seller is selling their property. And at the following of the closing, they want to have their wired proceeds sent to their bank account. What these business email compromises or email account compromises will do is infiltrate one piece of the business transaction, whether it be the realtor, the loan entity, or the settlement company. Usually identifying that a real estate transaction has taken place and that proceeds are expected. The fraudster will send a fraudulent email back to the title company with a compromised email account that changes wiring instructions. So the seller is expecting to have these wired funds sent back to their actual bank account, when in reality, what's going to happen is the title company, believing that they are receiving correct wire instructions to be changed, will then send those wired funds onto the illicit actor's actual account or onto the account of an individual that is part of the scheme, either witting or unwitting. Oftentimes, these scams are being carried out by fraudsters, which are working with other individuals to receive and then transfer the funds once again, which makes it very difficult for law enforcement to investigate. What these look like, and here's just some information about how these email account compromises take place, is either through intrusion, right? So an email account can be hacked into, and that can be as a result of having weak passwords. Or you might fall victim of a phishing scheme in which you receive an emailed link, believing that it's coming from your banking institution. You click on that link, In reality, it's a fraudster taking you to a different location or allowing that fraudster the ability to jump in and look at email traffic or correspondence that you have ongoing within an email account. There's malicious hyperlinks, which basically same as that phishing scam is going to have you going off to a link which is not taking you to where you're actually intending to go. And what these email accounts look like, you can see on this page. If the true email that the title company, for example, is expecting to receive wiring instructions from is joesmith@gmail.com, the way that they'll change that so that it's very hard for the recipient at the title company to identify, for example, is by modifying some of the letters. And now I've basically changed some of these so that they look like the original email, but in reality, they're a different email altogether. You can see that Joe Smith with a 0 in place of the O, an R and an N in place of an M, switching around the I and the A in Gmail, or adding a 1 at the end of Gmail in place of the L. These are all different things which at the very quick glance, you might not notice. And let's be honest, most of us, when we're receiving email traffic, are not concentrating very specifically on the address itself, because we're expecting to receive these emails and we know who they might be coming from. So if you're not paying attention to this, you might quickly walk past it, not concentrate on it for long, and engage with someone that you believe is Joe Smith, but in reality, you're speaking with someone else via these email transaction or email correspondence. So how do you avoid these, right? One of the things that we suggest is verifying any changes in payment location by actually having a telephone conversation. It's very concerning to make changes to where a wired transaction is going to be sent, or when you're making a change to payment location without having an actual conversation with someone that you know and trust. Doing that solely by email is not necessarily the best method, and we recommend having other basically safeguards in place to ensure it's being done correctly. Utilizing web-based email accounts, not necessarily saying that they're all bad, but some of them are a little bit more susceptible to being hacked. And oftentimes that's a result of having poor or inadequate passwords in place, weak passwords in place. You also want to be careful about when you're posting information on social media or other company websites. This can impact with saying what you have going on, what's happening in your life, just bought or sold a house, expecting to go on a vacation. The fraudsters will take advantage of that social media and socially engineer activities and fraudulent activity targeted either at you or others, where they might be able to intercept, place themselves into the middle of a financial transaction. And then, of course, regarding wire transfer payments, any requests for secrecy or pressure to take very quick action on having to send funds is a concern. We find this happening to accounts payable entities, where there might be a company that's put in place a transaction which is supposed to be sent out. The illicit actor will intercept or change wiring instructions and insist that it be done immediately. There's no time to waste. And oftentimes those are targeted at individuals within an entity who are either more junior to the person who's making the request. And so they feel an obligation to be able to respond fast to a boss or management and take care of those wire transactions quickly. Of course, the faster those things happen, and with that pressure that happens, it's oftentimes not going to be a legitimate transaction which is taking place. You can always pause and take a beat in order to make sure that what's happening is being done correctly. The financial procedures at banks, here's just other ways to avoid these email account compromise scams. Consider utilizing intrusion detection, having safe firewalls in place. Be able to look through the transactions or the requests that are coming for changes to wiring instructions to ensure that that information is in fact accurate. Again, two-factor authentication, ways to make sure that sudden changes to requests for payments and that sort of thing are not able to happen. One of the other suggestions that we recommend is not having one particular individual within an entity be responsible for both setting up and then also verifying wire transactions. It's hard for a person who's trying to infiltrate or take over an email account to be able to take over multiples necessarily at the same time. Because at some point, someone within those office locations or individuals are going to speak to each other. So they often try to target it just at one. If you can have separation of duties, sometimes that will what we'll do is basically discover or intercede in the process of that scam trying to take place. If these things happen, if you are the victim of an email account compromise, or if an entity is a victim of a business email compromise, you're going to want to contact the financial institution as fast as possible. What we're able to do in some of these cases by working with our financial institutions and our local partners is try to stop these wire transactions from moving beyond the first hop, if you will. So if there's a notification of an email account compromise in which a wire transfer has been sent to the wrong location or to a location that was unintended, contacting the financial institution right away can help to stop that from going any further. You're also going to want to contact your local field office to report the email account compromise. The Washington field office number is listed there. And then also you would want to go through and file a complaint at ic3.gov. This piece is really important, and I want to stress on it that ic3.gov is not just a place where the complaint goes in and is never viewed. We have a ton of resources expended upon ic3.gov to look at these complaints that come in related to all different types of frauds. And that information is compiled, reviewed, and tried to be put together so that we can connect dots. Where if I have one victim in Virginia, for example, and another victim in Seattle, Washington, that were victimized by the same individual, those two complaints that come through may provide some very valuable information to us in terms of where the money went, what was the IP address of the fraudster that they used, how did the email come in, what sort of internet service providers can we contact in order to ask for information that might be beneficial and useful for our investigative effort. Providing very detailed, complete, and thorough information to the ic3.gov complaint location is going to give us some very beneficial information to trying to get our investigation off the ground. When these transfers do take place, if we're contacted early enough, it is possible, though not guaranteed, that we are able to stop those wire transactions from moving forward and even to claw back some of those funds. I will say that gets more and more difficult for us as soon as the money goes out of the country. So the earlier we can try to intercede and stop those wires from going anywhere, the better. So let's talk about another type of scam. And this is one which is particularly focused at our elder population. And those are romance scams. What a romance scam is basically the best way to think about it is the illicit actor, the criminal, is going to surf out onto different dating sites or social media sites where they can try to target individuals that may be lonely in some way, that are looking for a relationship. And what those scammers do is they target and take advantage of those people who are looking for that companionship or romantic relationships. And what they do is they then target, after targeting that person, they begin to build a relationship, which is very fast. It moves quicker than a normal relationship might. And they try to get that person that they're creating this relationship with to send money somewhere for some particular reason. Oftentimes our seniors are going to be targeted on this because in some situations they're either isolated from family members, they're particularly lonely, and might be susceptible to seeking out some sort of companionship. These romance scammers are incredibly polished. They use very well-rehearsed scripts in order to be able to build rapport, draw upon the heartstrings of the victims. And they're exceptionally good at building these very, very strong relationships in a very short period of time. the way that these scams are set up is very organized. You have individuals that make the initial contact, and those contacts may be, as I said, via social media sites, networking sites, or oftentimes dating sites. And once that contact is made, and if you will, the hook is set, those individuals are turned over to the people who really know how to tug at the heartstrings. They're the people who know how to converse and carry on long conversations, building that romantic relationship over time. Mind you, these are not people that you ever will have met in person. They're never going to send you, do an actual FaceTime call with you or come to visit you in person. It's all going to be done via text messages or emails. There's reasons why they won't be able to meet you in person or why they can't see you in person. There's always some sort of a problem that they're not able to get to where you are, or they're not going to be able to come see you. There's too many excuses as to why they can't do that, which is an indicator or a red flag. So signs of what might be a romance scam: the person that you're interacting with or that someone is interacting with professes love too quickly. We've seen in some of these cases where an individual will start contacting someone via these romance sites, and within 3 days is saying, "You're the love of my life. I want to marry you." These are not normal activities that take place, especially with someone that you've never met with in person. Other signs of these scams: the person claims to be a United States citizen, but is actually overseas, whether it be for business or military service. This individual that the victim falls in love with, asks for money too quickly, right? They're in a hardship situation. Something happens where they immediately need funding, and you're the only person that can help. These are the sorts of statements that these subjects use, and they're able, through that rapport building that they've done, they're able to get those victims in order to be able to send funds. And as I said, some of these things are for emergencies. Oftentimes, it's going to be related to a hospital bill. They can't get out of the country. They need money in order to be able to obtain a passport or a visa. There's just all kinds of different ways that these scams come up. But if you take a pause and a moment to think that through, oftentimes you'll find this just doesn't make sense. The other thing that we find in these romance scams is that the subject will tell the victim that they need to isolate themselves from their family, from others. Don't talk about our relationship. And that's purposefully done to keep the individual away from someone who might bring reason back to the conversation. The scammers will do everything they can to illegitimize law enforcement. They'll tell you not to trust the FBI, that they're there to try to take your money. And there are these scams wind up resulting in individuals that we have gone to and talked to in person, showed up at a door, knocked on that door, showed our credentials. They could reach out and touch us in person, yet they won't believe us that they're being scammed. They'll believe the person they've never met online. According to IC3, the scams for romance scam or confidence fraud over the last few years resulted in over 6,817 victims, 60 years old or older, with approximate losses of $281 million in 2020. This is a huge problem. And as I said, not one that we can prosecute our way out of. This is something that we're going to need to be able to educate and hope that the way that we get these things to stop is by individuals recognizing what the scheme is and not falling victim. So how are they targeted? I kind of covered some of this, but again, the seniors are targeted via social media, Facebook accounts, through dating sites. They'll even target through prayer groups, a place where you would feel the most safe and trusted, or book clubs. And the way to avoid being a victim is basically just to be aware that you are a potential target, right? To not allow someone to take advantage of your emotions, to pull at your heartstrings, and to talk to others. If it seems too good to be true, if someone's professing their love for you too quickly, talk about that, ask someone, speak about it, and get some additional guidance. And then know your payee. If anyone asks you to send money to them, someone you've never met in person, that just doesn't seem right. You should avoid doing that. don't allow yourself to become victimized by someone asking you to send money elsewhere without verifying exactly what's happening. Talk to your financial institution, see what they have to say. Does this make sense for me to do? As a quick example of what these things look like, here's just two pictures on the right-hand side of your screen there, which are pictures of individuals that have been sent to some of our romance victims. This is a person who works on an oil rig. They have an accident, they're in the hospital, and they're trying to get back home to the US. If only they had some money to be able to do it. So they ask for money to get a flight back home or to get repairs to some of the business that they're working with on the rig. Believe it or not, for some reason, this oil rig worker scam is a common theme and a common background story that our the romance scammers utilize. If you see this out there, if you're on a dating app and you're all of a sudden involved in a relationship with someone on an oil rig who professes love too quickly, it could very well be a romance scam, and you might want to get yourself out of that relationship very, very quickly. Another form of scam is a tech support scam, and these are on the rise very recently. A tech support scam is essentially where your criminal, the bad actor, poses as customer service, a security or technical support rep, offering to provide support for a computer problem that you're having, or a bank account issue or an email account that you might have. We see these that cut across various different entities. For example, we've seen them related to virtual currency accounts. We've seen them related to your Apple phone account, where you'll get a pop-up message on your phone that says, hey, your phone has a virus, or your computer has a virus. We will help you resolve that issue. Click this link. It'll give you a phone number to call, and you're starting that phone call right away. And you believe that you're speaking with someone who actually can help you related to the problem you're having, when in reality, you are talking to a scammer. That scammer will come up with ways to have you resolve this problem. Many of those times, it results in you sending money in some way. We've seen that these result in individuals being told to go purchase gift cards and to provide the gift card number information to the illicit actor in order to be able to pay for the repair that's being made. We've seen that in these tech support scams with a computer that seems to be locked up with a virus, the user of that computer, the victim, will allow the illicit actor to take remote control over their computer, which is allowing them to get in and view bank account detail, scrub through emails, change email passwords, all of which is not going to be seen by the user because it's basically being done remotely. These tech support frauds can happen through unsolicited telephone calls, search engine advertising. For example, if you have a problem with your computer and you throw in a Google search message to say, how do I fix this? Pay for advertising will put a particular website at the very, very top of that list as an advertisement for you to click on to help solve your problem. When you do that, you may not be getting to the true solution or a true entity that can help you. You might be getting the illicit actor, who then starts having conversations with you, gets into your account and your account information or into your computer, and begins to scam you through that process. These tech support scams can be incredibly costly. In one example that we have ongoing right now, we have one victim who recently lost a substantial amount of Bitcoin for having a support scam in which they released their private keys over to the bad actor, who then moved all accounts. And if anybody knows what the value of Bitcoin is today, it was quite high in terms of savings and retirement that wound up draining this individual's retirement and savings accounts quite quickly. In 2020, IC3 had over 9,000 complaints released sort of support fraud, and it's about $116 million in losses. Again, these numbers are stagnant, not able to be prosecuted our way out of necessarily. We try to educate, notify, socialize these types of schemes as best we can so that people are aware of them. But when our subjects are overseas, and the actual activity is happening in a different country, it's sometimes very difficult for us to have an enforcement action upon those individuals when they're located out of the country. Helpful tips to remember in terms of tech support fraud: legitimate customer service or security are never going to initiate unsolicited contact with you, right? It's just not going to happen. Again, consider installing ad blocker software. Be cautious of customer support that you find via open source searching, like I said, that Google search. And then resist the pressure to act quickly. This is the same common theme that I've mentioned a few times, where you want to just be able to take a breath about what's happening. Oftentimes, who you're dealing with in terms of that illicit actor will encourage you to move quick, get this done. It has to happen immediately. They'll give information out that says or suggests that there's grave danger if you don't immediately act. When in reality, if you take a moment just to breathe here to figure out what's happening, you might realize that this just doesn't seem correct. It seems too good to be true, or this acting so fast is not a reasonable action to take. And then recognizing fraudulent attempts. If you're working on your computer and a strange pop-up that says you have a lock screen or something comes up on your computer, just shut your computer down. Ignore those instructions that tell you not to power off or restart. Oftentimes, the hacker or the intruder is trying to get in order to be able to access information with your computer. If you turn it off, that cuts the connection. It doesn't allow them to do that any further. And then you can try to figure out what happened and what sort of virus they're trying to either install or how they've gotten into your computer system. And again, I keep talking about computer, but this applies to everything. It applies to your cell phones. It applies to other tech that you might be using, iPads, you name it. They can be targeted against all of these different places. And that tech support fraud, you think someone's trying to give you aid and come to your assistance, when in reality, they're trying to scam you out of your hard-earned money. Other types of frauds. These are, quite common, but they've changed over time. We've probably all heard the examples of the email that you receive from the foreign prince who wants to give you money, right? Well, the bad actors know that we've kind of caught on to that. And so the general public doesn't fall for that quite so much. So what are they doing now? They will reach out and tell you that you've won a lottery that you may not even have ever entered. Well, how is that possible, right? But when people start to hear the allure of money, big, huge sum payoffs, we begin to throw logic out the window and think to ourselves, boy, wouldn't it be nice if I could actually get to those funds? These lottery scams, they're often targeted again at our elderly, and they suggest these funds are coming from out of the country. What you're going to need to do is pay taxes in advance and pay some other fees that are related to getting the funds. But as soon as those are all paid up, the amounts will come to you. Well, the amount you're dealing with, if you're expecting to win hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're asking you to pay $50,000 in order to get that money into the country, it seems like the trade-off's pretty good. So they'll encourage this payment, and then of course the lottery prize winnings never come. So these the way that these happen is you have callers either via the telephone. It doesn't really happen as much via email anymore, but a lot of these calls will come in to say that they've won the foreign lottery. They'll claim to be members of government or a lottery official, customs officials, to impart some sort of an authority upon what's happening. And as I said, they're tricking the scammer is tricking the victim into paying money in advance to receive their prize. The scammers will find personal information. They socially engineer this to add legitimacy and bona fides to what they're saying to the victim. They'll know where you live. They'll know the job that you've had. They'll know family member information. And all of that is designed to make it appear as though they're legitimate. Our seniors are sometimes more easier targeted because they're generally more trusting. They're willing to believe that something good is happening to them. They're not as aggressive or won't necessarily take a really hard stance. And we've found that many of our seniors, in discussing these schemes with them, are wanting to please. And what better way to please, because it would be beneficial to both sides, right? I'm going to get money coming in, and this nice person's talking to me on the phone about money that they want to give to me. Why would I not go along with it? Again, according to IC3, lottery sweepstakes scams in 2020, over nearly 4,000 victims with losses of $38 million. Again, these numbers are staggering. They're huge numbers. And when we talk to these individuals that have been victimized, oftentimes they'll tell us, it seemed too good to be true, but it was such a huge amount of money they were talking about. I just wanted to believe it. As an example, I'll just show you this quick video. I'm not going to show you the whole thing here, but this video, I'm not sure if you recognize this individual, but this is the former director of the FBI, William Webster, who was targeted with one of these schemes. I'll show you about a minute and a half, and I'm going to let this play through, but I want you to listen to the way that the scammer is talking to Mr. Webster on the telephone about the potential earnings, but then also when Mr. Webster began to catch on and talk about this, how the voice in the rhetoric changes of the individual on the line. Let me play this for you.
I get more calls than you would anticipate, and this one sounded like I had won something. Congratulations and so forth.
The total value of the award is about 72 million.
72?
72 million. You're the first place winner. And the reason why they selected you to give you this amount, because I do some of your background check. I know that you was a judge, you was a lawyer, you was in the U.S. Navy, Homeland Security, and the basketball team, and all of those stuff. I do your background check.
In this particular case, I think my wife heard me having a conversation, and she was protesting in her own sweet way by playing around with somebody like that. Don't string him along. Later, I don't know how the conversation turned sour, but it did. And at that point, he shifted gears, and instead of sweet talk, he began to threaten her.
Hey, I know you're playing around, right? You know what I'm going to do? I won't call you back. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill your husband. I'm going to set your house on fire because you seem to be playing around and you doesn't know who am I. So listen, I'm not giving you any more warning. I'm just going to send out my guys and listen. Anytime you put back yourself in Washington, D.C., you'll be killed. Look at sniper. I know you're home. You see, you live the place where you're home at. You live at a very lonely place. And the moment you arrive, I'm gonna put a shot in your head. I'm gonna burn your house down. I don't play.
As time went along, I learned how.
So as you can see from watching this video, and some of the information continues there, the rhetoric changed a great deal from the beginning. The beginning was all about rapport building, and I know who you are. You've done all these wonderful things. And that's why we want to give you this money, right? And then when that began to change, then it all of a sudden changes to a very aggressive tone by our bad actor, threatening to kill this individual, threatening to kill the individuals on the other line, to burn a house down. These scams are real, and they happen all the time across our country. Thankfully, in this particular instance, former Director Webster recognized that it was a problem. He talked to our agents at the Washington field office who were able to make these recorded phone calls. And with this is a subject we actually were able to get into custody. But it's something to be aware of and be concerned with. It's always that if it's too good to be true, it probably is, right? You don't just get $72 million given off to you when you've never entered a lottery to get it. That's just one of those things that if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Another type of scam to walk you through is IRS and impersonation scams. Follows a little bit along with these lottery winning scams, but this is where calls are coming to you at your home, uh, claiming that the IRS is reaching out for you because you owe back taxes. That you owe back taxes, and that if you do not pay these amounts immediately, that you will be arrested and prosecuted. They've gone so far in these scams to say that they're waiting right outside to execute a search warrant on your house. My very own sister-in-law began to fall victim to one of these scams, and thankfully called me to ask me about this, and said, hey, they're claiming that our business hasn't paid the taxes. They're getting ready to execute a search warrant and to come and arrest me. And I explained that just is not true. This sort of thing does not happen. The individuals are counting on you to fall victim to this concern over the authority of a government official telling you what you need to do. They will impersonate the IRS, FBI, Social Security Administration, DEA, local police, and tell you that you owe money and that you must pay it immediately. But they don't just rely upon government entities as well. They might pose, as you can see here, as company workers, utility company workers, saying that they're going to be at the door and say, hey, look, we're going to shut your water off if you don't pay these amounts. These are very concerning scams. And again, they are really relying upon that ability to socially maneuver the victim on the telephone, and looking for someone that's going to be exceptionally trusting, and wanting to pay those amounts out for the fear of being in trouble with law enforcement, which is a very valid fear to have, but you can always verify that detail. One, if they're telling you you're back on your taxes and you haven't paid your taxes, it's likely that you would have heard from the IRS about that sometime in advance, probably in writing, which is how the IRS communicates. The other thing to consider is federal government, the IRS, the FBI will never ask you to send money to them via a wire transfer. Will never ask you to go and obtain gift cards in order to pay something off. Again, all of these things that really don't pass the smell test should allow you to take that pause and that brief moment to understand this is not something I'm going to fall victim to. But these IRS impersonation scams are becoming more knowledgeable. They're becoming more known. And so our bad actors, the fraudsters, are changing their methodology. They keep trying to stay ahead of what we're enforcing or what information we can put out. You can see on the screenshot here, this is from irs.gov. They've actually put out their own press releases and information about this to say the IRS is never going to call you and ask you to send money via a telephone call. Those back tax problems or issues get brought to you in writing first. The IRS will contact you in writing, explain what's happened. They'll usually express that you might want to find an attorney to speak with so they can walk you through that process. So just keep these things in mind. These IRS and impersonation scams in 2020 resulted in losses of over $45 million. These are huge sums of money that we're talking about in victimization across the United States. The next type of fraud activity is money mule activity. And I'll just explain generally what a money mule is. A money mule is basically an individual who's either witting, knowing what they're doing, or oftentimes, and most times, unwitting, to transfer money that's coming in from other illicit activity. The best way to describe this is to go back to my romance scam that I talked about before. The romance scammer will victimize a trusting individual who thinks they're sending money to their loved one, the love of their life. The love of their life has told them to send money to a bank account in Indianapolis. When they send that money, another person who's being victimized, maybe through a romance scam, maybe through a work at home scam, receives that money and then is told to forward that money on to a different account. Oftentimes they're told, here's $10,000 that's going to come into this account. You can keep $1,000 for yourself and just send the other $9,000 onto this account. Again, that sounds too good to be true, right? If it's a work at home scam, why would anyone allow you to take $1,000 out of a $10,000 amount for having done nothing? But these money mules provide this activity, and it's a layering of money laundering activity. That transfer into this bank account, that money mule bank account, is the first step in the laundering activity. It's gone from the romance scam victim to a new bank account, to the mule's account. And then it leaves again, probably to another mule and another mule before it leaves the country and is expatriated. So these money mules fall victim to these scams through a myriad of different other types of scams. The reason why that happens is because the illicit scammer is trying to insulate themselves from the actual activity. And so if they're not the first hop for where that money goes, they then can be insulated from the transfers that take place. Again, the scams include a variety of different elder frauds, tech support, romance scam, human trafficking. Sometimes these monies are moving, drug cases, money's moving through these, reshipping schemes. Money mule activity is a major problem within the United States, with individuals believing that they're acting at the behest of someone that they've fallen in love with in order to be able to move those funds on elsewhere. I will tell you that money mules are a central cog to illicit activity. And what law enforcement is trying to do at this point is to remove that Jenga piece, if you will, that middle cog out of the scam enterprise. And by moving that out, we might disrupt the criminal activity. But what that means is the money mule then becomes part of the illicit activity. And when we show up at a money mule's house and we knock on that door and we explain to them that they are being asked to move money for illegitimate purposes, we'll explain to them that if they continue to do that activity, that they can be prosecuted. And that's recently just happened in a few different cases throughout the country where a money mule who, even seemingly not involved, has been told that the financial activity that they're engaged in is illegal. And if they don't stop it, we have arrested those individuals and they've had to plead guilty to felony crimes, federal felonies. So this is very important. Money mule activity is not something that you want to engage in. If, just like going back and to the romance scam, if someone asks you to send money to them when you've never met them in person, opening a bank account for someone, either in your name or in the name of a business that you don't own, or an LLC that you're being asked to create in order to be able to open this bank account, again, it doesn't pass the smell test. You can't do that. So keep that in the back of your mind, that if you're being asked to do these things, it doesn't seem legitimate. It probably isn't. And you need to talk to someone that you can trust, whether it be a family member, go to the bank and speak with someone at the bank who can explain to you what's happening. But you have to reach out to others in order to be able to make sure that you're not falling victim to these types of scams, or that you are not unwittingly putting yourself into the middle of a scam where you eventually could be charged as an illicit actor. The information related to IC3 on this is, since February of 2018 and updated through April of this year, for over 4,000 victims for $1.2 billion in accounts which have been involved in money mule activity. That's a huge number that we're talking about there. And it affects the young and the old. In this particular instance, we've had money mules that we've gone and spoken with who are 18-year-olds believing that they're doing a work from home project, where they're just moving money through from one place to the next, all the way up to an 89-year-old victim out of Phoenix, Arizona, who was victimized not once in a romance scam, but twice, and was a money mule, and eventually was charged out of Phoenix for that activity. Other types of scams that you might see, which I'm not going to go into great detail on here, but that could impact elders, are going to be Medicare-related fraud schemes, investment scams or Ponzi schemes. An investment scam where someone's telling you that you're going to have a 25% rate of return in 30 days, or you'll triple your money in 30 days. Those things are not legitimate. High yield investment schemes, it's only a way to separate you from your hard-earned money, and you're never going to see a return on that investment. It's very, very unlikely that such an investment opportunity exists, and if it did, everyone would take advantage of it. Employment fraud, again, this is your work at home scam. Charity fraud, especially around this time of year, right? We're coming up into the holidays. People are wanting to give and to be charitable. You want to make sure that you're looking into the charity that you're giving your funds to. Is that a legitimate charity, or is it just someone who set up a funding account where you can fund them for what they're supposed to be giving the charitable funds to? We have found in these charity fraud cases where they'll say 99% of the money is going to go to the charity and 1% to the administration of the charity, when in reality, it's quite the reverse. Identity theft, you have to be careful about your identity, protect your personal identifying information. The more you share it, the more opportunities there are for it to be taken and thieved and then utilized in an identity theft scam. Grandparent schemes. If you haven't heard of these, this is basically where a grandparent is contacted through social engineering, and you're believing that you're receiving an email or a telephone call from your grandchild who says, Grandma, Grandpa, I am in trouble. I'm down in Florida. I don't want to tell mom and dad, but I need $3,000 in order to be able to get myself out of this problem that I've got myself in. We found that grandparents in these grandparent scams are wanting to help. They have the ability to help, and they will be very, very trusting and go through that process. When in reality, you're dealing with an individual in a different country who's just trying to scam you through that process. And then pandemic and COVID related fraud, as I mentioned before, paycheck protection loans and unemployment insurance fraud. We've got a case that's coming out of the district in Pennsylvania right now, where individuals living in an assisted care facility were taken advantage of by the workers within that facility to apply for and receive unemployment insurance benefits from California. Now, these are individuals who do not work, who are retired in their 80s or older, who have then applied, and they live in Pennsylvania, applying for unemployment insurance out of California. Those payments are coming in, and the individuals that are pushing them to do these, make these requests or applications are the care workers that are there in a protected capacity, basically to care for the individuals that are under their care, and they're taking advantage of those seniors. This is where our seniors need to be very cautious and wary, but our caretakers of those seniors, the family members, the children, the grandchildren, need to be on the lookout for what's happening to our seniors to ensure that this sort of scam does not impact them. And then just a few things to talk about, to know, tips to avoid, right? Are you getting scammed? If you can answer yes to any of the following questions, you might be getting scammed. Are you about to take cash? Are you about to cash a check from an item you sold over the internet? That someone bought from you on the internet, right? So this happens. People want to sell a car, and the individual says, "Yeah, here, I'll buy your car. Here's the check. It's coming to you." In reality, that check is a completely bogus check, is never going to clear the account. Is your result of you having received a check, communicating with someone by email? Did the check arrive, or did the product arrive via overnight delivery service? Are you being told that you need to move money to someone that you don't know, that you've never met in person? Did you win a lottery that you didn't enter? These are all different types of things that, again, I just give it the smell test. If it doesn't pass that smell test, is it something that just doesn't follow logic? You need to slow down, talk to somebody else, and ensure that you're not engaging in an activity. You can see on this last bullet point is the person receiving the money telling you not to talk to anybody else about it and to move really, really quick. These are examples of situations where the individual is simply trying to take advantage of you not being willing to talk to someone, or creating distrust in the other person that you won't discuss it with them in order to try to victimize you. I will give you a personal example on that. I actually had a case that I was working. It was a romance scam victim. Again, it was an elderly individual, and she had been receiving money in her bank account and then moving that as a money mule. I went and talked with her in person, met her at her home. She was able to reach out and touch me, right? And say, all right, I know you're here. Showed her my business credentials, my badge. She knew that I was an FBI agent. After meeting with her and interviewing her, she called me the next day and explained that she had sent more money to the scammer on the line. That person told her that I was not real, that I was trying to scam her by showing up at her house with my badge and my credentials. She believed that person who she'd never met in person, and sent more money beyond what we had talked about. This is a perfect example where that person will build such amazing rapport, better rapport than I could build with the person in person. So be wary of it, and be wary of people who might be falling victim to that. Avoid scams. If I said it looks too good to be true, it probably is. Focus on that. And spotting imposters, what can you do, right? If you begin to see that this might be happening, go to the do not call registry or check the FTC. The FTC will list different types of scams that happen. Don't always believe your caller ID and who might be calling you. There's easy ways to spoof what the number appears to be when it's coming on. We all get those auto insurance calls right now, right? You need to expend your auto insurance, or your warranty's about to expire. And it appears as though it's a call that's coming right from your very same neighborhood because of the first 3 digits in the telephone number. You can easily spoof those things. Do an online search. A lot of times people will be scammed, and you simply need to type into Google, a few different descriptors of what you're being asked to do to see if it pops up. And oftentimes it will. And it'll pop up from the FBI, the IRS, the DEA, you name it, trusted agencies, which will be able to explain to you that this is probably a problem. And then I've said this numerous times, but talk to someone you trust, a family member. Bring this up. And one point I really want to emphasize is, if you are becoming a victim of this sort of a thing, especially romance scams or lottery scams, there can be a feeling of embarrassment that maybe you begin to know this is probably too good to be true, but I've already sent money. And because of that, you're embarrassed. You don't want to tell somebody else. You got to get past that embarrassment in order to be able to talk to someone you trust who's going to be able to help you extricate yourself from being victimized any further. What else can you do? Freeze your credit, right? If your personal information gets out, you want to be able to freeze your credit so that people can't take advantage of that identity and apply for credit in your name. What do you do if you've become victimized? You want to contact your creditors and financial institutions, let them know that, hey, this is happening, so that they can assist, close any tampered with accounts. And as I said, notify your credit bureau, right? Get a credit alert out there, file a fraud alert, because when doing that, the credit reporting agencies will be able to identify that, hey, this is not our person who's actually applying for this or that's trying to obtain this credit. It's somebody different, which will help avoid any financial losses in the future or anything that you might be financially responsible for down the road. As we said, filing a local police report, that's a great place to go. File a complaint with the FTC. Share your information. If you've been victimized by something, share that so that someone else won't be victimized by the same. Or if they go to search, they can find that detail. And then filing a report with IC3, right? As I mentioned before, that Crime Complaint Center is compiling all of this detail to help law enforcement solve these crimes and put bad actors in jail for having scammed victims out of their hard-earned money. Here are just some of the other resources that can be used. FBI.gov, justice.gov, Elder Justice has some really great information related to elder fraud. Just some of the other resources that are available for you as well. So that's really where we are. I'm about right at time because we started a little bit late. So that was just about the time it was asked. What I'll do is stop sharing and go take a look at some of the questions that are here, and see if I can answer them for you guys, if there are any.
Hi, Patrick. We actually do have one question in the Q&A.
Okay.
I'll grab it for you real quick. Can you comment a little on the risks of Bitcoin in particular?
Sure. So Inherently, there's not necessarily a risk with Bitcoin. What I will say on that is um, the best way to describe situations with Bitcoin. I used to work in our money laundering unit, and we dealt with the Criminal Investigations Division initiative related to virtual currency. What I will say about Bitcoin is there are tax obligations associated with the acquisition and sale of virtual currency. So when you sell Bitcoin and there is a financial gain, there are taxes associated with that, and the IRS tracks these things. That's one. In relation to Bitcoin and what I was talking about before in the tech fraud scams or the tech support scams, that relates to individuals trying to obtain your private key information from you. They will send information that suggests that your account, which may be hosted at a service provider, Coinbase, Paxful, something like that, that your account has been frozen or that you're having login attempt problems. By engaging with that individual online, you may be allowing them to have access to private key detail, which is what happened in one of our instances. Basically, the individual said, hey, look, there's a problem with that particular wallet address. We want you to just be able to move it to a different wallet address. They were seemingly from the hosted provider. And they basically said, just give us the private keys so we can move those funds. The victim wound up moving those funds into a different account. Of course, it was an account that the victim had control over, I'm sorry, that the subject had control over with their own private keys, and our victim lost basically all of the value that was stored in that wallet. There are other scams related to virtual currency, not necessarily Bitcoin in every situation, but initial coin offerings, a new cryptocurrency being created, offering you to get in on the ground floor. Invest early, and look what happened to the value of Bitcoin, right? In 2016, the value was one Bitcoin for like $500 US. Now, I think my last recent check, one Bitcoin was worth $64,000. So the value can really go up. Scammers will try to take advantage of that desire to want to get in early, buy low, sell high, and will suggest that you purchase into an initial coin offering. Well, this is a coin that may never actually come to fruition. It may never go live. It may just simply be an investment scam altogether. So those are things that I would suggest you be wary of related to virtual currency, not specific necessarily to Bitcoin, but like anything else, you just need to be cautious with investment opportunities.
Thank you, Patrick. You provided so much information. I thank you. And that video was extremely impactful. So thank you for sharing the insights. Let's all be aware, especially during this holiday season and actually going throughout the year, that the scammers are very insightful and they have a lot of wraparound. So let's all keep our eyes open. And thank you for the information. We will be sharing this next week via email with the video and the presentation. So everybody will have a chance to take a look and get those key insights once again. Please know that we will be sending you a survey after this webinar, so take a look and let us know, because your insights really help us develop our plan going into next year. And we will be sending, actually, if you're an IDB Global Federal Credit Union member, we will be sending an additional email shortly about holiday scams, so more insights to help you along this journey. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Patrick, for all that amazing information, and we look forward to amazing webinars in 2022. Have a wonderful new year and a wonderful holiday.